Donald Trump has been found guilty in what he calls his show trial or his rigged trial. And many are convinced that the justice system, along with all the other components of government, are so thoroughly corrupt as to be beyond redemption, and that the system has made sure that they know that we know, but they simply don't care. And when a population loses faith in its institutions that manage the society, well, that society will no longer function. And they know that. And again, they simply do not care. There's a lot of talk about secession and civil war in the United States, so much so that even Hollywood has gotten into the fray with the recently released film Civil War. But how likely is such a scenario? Well, there was a poll released very recently that came to some very startling results. Half of Americans expect a second U.S. Civil War within years. More than 40% with the Great Replacement Theory, which we are told, of course, via the mainstream media, Wikipedia, and social media companies, well, it's just a conspiracy theory. But also that nearly a fifth, well, they would choose to bring a gun to a violent political row. Moreover, more than 40% of Americans favor a strong leader over democracy and adhere to the belief that an immigrant takeover in the United States is happening now. Now, before we take a look at the larger macro problems in the world and their associated white pills on how things can get better, let's talk about what you can do for yourself and your well-being on a personal level, and most importantly, over all things, is your health. It's no secret that the US government is not only bought and paid for, but is also highly corrupt, as we shall see in this video. So I'd like to ask you, have you heard about the FDA's attempt at controlling the powerful supplement NMN? Word is the sale of MNN could be coming to an abrupt end very soon, with plans to reclassify it from a supplement to a drug, and thus corner the market and take away access to this supplement from you. With supplies potentially being cut off, now is the time to secure yours. So what is it? Well, several studies, including from Harvard University, have shown that MNN supplementation has been shown to provide numerous health benefits, including improved energy, endurance, strength, enhancing your metabolism, vascular health and blood flow, and even anti-aging effects like associated weight gain. And thus, I'd like to wholeheartedly recommend Black Forest's NMN supplements, as I've been taking them for months now and have experienced a boost in energy levels, mental clarity, overall mood, and well-being after taking them. In fact, now that I've seen the results, I'll probably take them for good. So then head on over to blackforestsupplements.com/pigeon and gain your access to this amazing health supplement now with the special offer on NMN, and get one free when you buy two in this limited 48-hour promotion. Stand up for your right to access beneficial health products. So again, go to blackforestsupplements.com/pigeon, give it a try. I'm sure you'll be glad that you did. Researchers at the University of California, Davis uncovered what they thought were worrying levels of alienation from and mistrust of American democratic society and its institutions. In their recently conducted survey of 8,620 adults across the country, well, whatever the validity of their poll, what is clear is that there are serious and massive polarization forces currently ripping the United States apart from within. While Joe Biden calls America a beacon for the world, what he absolutely misses is that in reality, it is an empire in steep decline. America is a country now marked with Venezuela-tier elections, a corrupt judiciary, a bought and paid for government, institutional backing of lawlessness, growing and visible poverty, as well as studies showing an unprecedented collapse of societal conditions within the United States. Or, if I can put it more simply, a lot of people believe that the nation is headed toward a failed state. And not only that, but that America is a failed experiment that is teetering on the brink of civil war. What is true is that when using the common metrics that political scientists use to determine the signs of a failing state, Well, the US checks many of those boxes. In fact, studies have shown that much of the illusion of democracy is just that, an illusion. So about this study, well, after a rigorous analysis of voting from 1982 until 2002, a study entitled Testing Theories of American Politics, Elite Interest Groups, and Average Citizens, well, this study showed that the preferences of the top 10% of Americans routinely trumped those of the average voter. Moreover, that the bedrock white-black narrative of America misses the point. In America, things do not only relate to racial issues, but especially ones of class, and that more and more people, no matter their race, are finding life harder and harder and harder. Poverty is accelerating, civil discourse is breaking down, social cohesion has evaporated. Americans have become extremely complacent to the idea that their current living arrangements are the norm rather than the exception, and the elites, for their part, believe that any manner of social or economic trauma can be publicly ghosted or ignored by the sheer inertia of American power. Power that many suggest is now running on fumes. Looking internationally, there was the complete and total humiliation in Afghanistan with the abandonment of $80 billion in military equipment, combined with the ongoing failure in Ukraine and the inability to curb either Russia or China. And for that matter, just this week, China has surrounded the island of Taiwan with little to no response from the US Navy. In the country itself, well, there's the usual domestic summer rioting season coming up to a presidential election that is germinated and magnified with glee by the mainstream media, a media that has completely lost all credibility with those that it is paid to influence. There is the complete loss of control in American cities that sees weekly orgies of violence that makes them resemble war zones rather than neighborhoods in a first world nation. And human interaction and commerce within those cities, well, it ceases at dusk with the expectation that marauding bands of addicts, criminals, and yes, a combination of both will and do take control of those streets until daybreak. America's borders are wide open, with millions of irregular migrants arriving with little to no education, skills, or even basic English, and there are almost no provisions on how to feed, clothe, house, or provide health care for these people in what is already increasingly becoming an extremely stratified nation. The growing Maoist tendencies within that same media and, of course, within the halls of academia have turned the process of education into that of indoctrination. This current generation is testing the limits of what a nation can endure. While many of the fanatical Maoists in the media and academia are attempting to destroy the so-called four olds, old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits, they have absolutely nothing to replace them with. And at this point, the intergenerational contract has been ripped up and thrown to the floor. And in our era, where the dogmatic currency shifts by the day and emerging anti-human concepts percolate from the depths of social science departments across the country and then are promulgated by the controlled media, what is actually occurring is the attempted transformation in what the famed zoologist Desmond Morris called the human animal. The politics of division are only intensifying, and people are now grouping themselves along political lines even more strongly than by any other distinction. Americans are now not only encouraged to separate themselves along uncountable lines of distinction, but also to extol the virtue of celebrating these differences and call it a strength. And when looking at these socially engineered positions, well, it beggars belief. Facts that in any other time that would be self-evident are not so in our current era of mental gymnastics and cognitive dissonance, and the squealing cacophony of anything that repudiates ideology over demonstrable fact has become not the exception, but the norm. Now, previously and historically, These disparate tribes could be brought together and their differences smoothed over by a so-called super tribe. Rome did it, the West did it previously with the creation of nation-states, but like Rome, the United States is tearing itself apart from within, and like Rome, as it regressed as a society and a civilization, and as it tribalized within, so too, now in the 21st century, is America. And so then we're left with the question, is America headed to a so-called second civil war, or toward a second civil war? A lot of people seem to think so, and they're spurred on by algorithmically acceptable YouTube gatekeepers that say as much, of course, along with the controlled media. But what I think that most of these people misunderstand is the difference between a civil conflict and a civil war. I can't see the country being carved up into 2 or 3 or 4 opposing territories fighting it out. There will never be another army of Northern Virginia. There will never be a California-led Western Alliance with armies drawn up of volunteers and conscripts. Yes, there are groups within the United States that hate each other, but most people just want to get about their lives. So given this reality, I think it would be all but impossible to draw up maps for a second civil war based on these criteria. As much of it, and these differences that Americans hold, much of these differences are urban versus the rest. The only thing a massive percent of the country wants and demands is largesse, more bread and more circuses. They're not interested in a civil war. Now, what is absolutely much more probable is a civil conflict, and that a civil conflict could take place within states or between states, and the actions would be something similar to the troubles in Northern Ireland. For example, especially during an acute and prolonged economic crisis that does look to be on the foreseeable future. I myself see the future in much the same way as a mid-5th century Roman would, as he looked out and surveyed his crumbling empire. An empire that was busy tearing itself apart from within, rather than making arrangements for a mutually beneficial future. Does that sound at all familiar? But by no means are these black pills. In fact, I believe this video is one gigantic white pill, because the end of a thing is only the beginning of something new. And let's be honest, given all of the topics brought up in this video, it would be silly not to come to the conclusion that the current iteration of the United States, well, it's not working. So perhaps the country could evolve into a devolved country, less federalized, where people can live where they feel most agreeable. This would be an eminent solution and a better way to work out the differences that the United States has today, with DC telling people what they need to believe and how they need to live. A return to the way America was meant to be. States that were united but sovereign. Other ideas on how to make America a more functional country, well, perhaps the removal of the Supreme Court, which has become little more than a House of Lords that legislates from the bench. I'd see this as a good idea. And we're also actually already seeing this with a few recent rulings throwing out very contentious issues back to the states. I'm just spitballing here. I don't think that this is a black-pilled video. So give me your ideas. What do you think? Leave me your ideas in the comment section below and tell me whether you see a U.S. civil war, a second U.S. civil war on the horizon, or a civil conflict, and what ideas on how to make America a more functional country that you might have. Leave those in the comment section below. And with that, thanks very much for watching, and remember, for your health and well-being, head on over to Black Forest Supplements and get access to their NMN. Link is in the description. I've tried it now for several months and can really feel its beneficial effects. You too will be glad that you did. So again, thanks very much, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye for now.